In the frozen forests of France, the shattered villages of Belgium, and the rain-soaked trenches left behind by the First World War, German soldiers whispered a name with unease: the American shotgun. It was not a tank, not a bomber, not even a machine gun. It was a weapon that, on paper, seemed crude, almost primitive. Yet to those who faced it, the shotgun became something far worse than any rifle, an instrument of sudden, unstoppable death. At close range, there was no warning, no second chance, just thunder, fire, and silence. Long before the war ended, German officers filed formal protests, calling the weapon inhumane, while frontline troops learned to fear the dark corners of ruined towns where American infantry waited. This is the forgotten story of why the German army feared a weapon that shattered not only bodies, but morale itself. World War II was a war of distance, or so it was supposed to be. Generals planned sweeping maneuvers, armored breakthroughs, and artillery barrages measured in kilometers. But the reality on the ground told a different story. Most fighting happened up close, extremely close, in forests where visibility dropped to 10 meters, in cities reduced to rubble where every doorway hid death, in trenches and bunkers where a man could hear his enemy breathing before he ever saw him. Traditional rifles, accurate at long range, suddenly became slow and unforgiving. A bolt pulled too late, a missed shot, and the enemy was already on top of you. German soldiers were trained to fight with discipline and precision, but even the best training could not change the brutal truth of close quarters combat. Speed mattered more than accuracy, and fear traveled faster than bullets. The American army understood this problem well. Their soldiers, many of them hunters, farmers, and frontiersmen, had grown up with shotguns. They knew what that weapon could do at close range. While Europe had largely dismissed the shotgun as a civilian tool, Americans saw it differently. To them, it was a perfect answer to the chaos of modern infantry combat. Simple, reliable, devastating. When the U.S. entered the war, it brought not just industrial power, but battlefield pragmatism. And nowhere was that more evident than in the quiet decision to issue combat shotguns to frontline troops. The German fear of American shotguns did not begin in World War II. Its roots stretched back to WWII. In 1918, U.S. troops arrived in Europe armed with Winchester Model 1897 trench shotguns, short-barreled, pump-action weapons designed specifically for close combat. Loaded with buckshot, each trigger pull unleashed a cloud of lead that could clear a trench in seconds. German soldiers, accustomed to rifles and bayonets, were horrified. Entire assault teams could be stopped instantly. The psychological impact was enormous, so great, in fact, that Germany formally protested the use of shotguns, claiming they violated the laws of war. The protest failed, but the memory remained. By World War II, that memory had turned into a warning passed quietly between veterans. If the Americans have shotguns, some whispered, do not rush the corner. German infantry manuals never officially mentioned the weapon, but soldiers talked. Stories spread faster than facts. Men spoke of patrols wiped out in seconds, of bunkers stormed without warning, of screams cut short by a single deafening blast. Whether every story was true did not matter. Fear does not require accuracy, only repetition. WWII terror. What made the shotgun so terrifying was not just its killing power, but its unpredictability. A rifle fired one bullet. A machine gun fired many, but in a straight line. A shotgun fired destruction itself. At close range, buckshot spread like a storm, striking multiple targets at once. In tight spaces, trenches, stairwells, hallways, it was almost impossible to avoid. Body armor of the time offered no protection. Helmets were useless. Even near misses caused horrific wounds. German soldiers learned that cover meant little when the blast filled the space around them. There was also the sound. The shotgun did not crack like a rifle. It roared. A deep, thunderous boom that echoed through buildings and underground passages. Survivors often described the noise as more frightening than artillery because it meant the enemy was already there. Too close. American troops sometimes fired intentionally into walls or ceilings, knowing the sound alone could freeze their opponents in terror. The American Doki ran ofagg resnan. American infantry tactics emphasized aggressive movement. Fire and maneuver. Push forward. Keep the enemy off balance. Shotguns fit perfectly into this mindset. They required minimal training, functioned reliably in mud and rain, and allowed soldiers to dominate confined spaces. A single shotgunner could lead an assault team, clearing rooms while riflemen followed. German defenses, carefully designed around predictable rifle engagements, suddenly collapsed under this chaos. In Normandy, hedgerows turned battles into knife fights. In the Ardennes, forests swallowed visibility. In cities like Aachen and later Berlin, combat happened room by room. In these environments, the American shotgun became a symbol of inevitability. German soldiers began to associate its presence with defeat, not because it was everywhere, but because when it appeared, resistance often ended quickly. The fear became again. By 1944, the fear had become legend. German prisoners reportedly asked American guards if they carried shotguns. Some refused to enter buildings suspected of housing shotgun-armed troops. Others fired blindly through walls rather than advance. Commanders noticed the hesitation, but could do little to stop it. Fear, once planted, is nearly impossible to remove. Ironically, German attempts to condemn the shotgun as unfair only strengthened its reputation. American soldiers took pride in carrying a weapon the enemy openly feared. It became psychological warfare in its purest form. The shotgun did not just kill, it broke the will to fight, and yet, the story of this weapon remains largely untold. By the summer of 1944, the war in Western Europe had transformed into something far uglier than the neat arrows drawn on staff maps. Normandy was no open battlefield. It was a maze. Thick hedgerows rose like green walls, broken only by narrow gaps where death waited on both sides. German units, many of them battle-hardened veterans of the Eastern Front, believed they could bleed the Americans white in this terrain. They had machine guns, mortars, and defensive positions dug deep into the earth. What they did not anticipate was how close the fighting would become, or how unprepared they were for what happened when Americans crossed that final few meters. American infantry patrols began carrying shotguns into the hedgerows, not as novelty weapons but as tools of survival. When German soldiers leapt from concealed foxholes, the shotgun answered instantly. There was no need to aim carefully, no bolt to cycle, no delay. A single blast could stop an attack cold, sometimes striking multiple men at once. Survivors later described the shock of seeing comrades fall without even understanding how. The hedgerows amplified the sound, turning each shot into a booming declaration: the Americans are here. Hos, Tio, Hosa L. As Allied forces pushed deeper into France, the battlefield shifted again, this time into towns and cities. Places like St. Ellen, Aachen, and later the villages along the German border became scenes of relentless urban combat. Buildings stood half collapsed, stairwells choked with dust, and rooms connected by jagged holes blasted through walls. German defenders relied on ambush tactics, hiding in upper floors or behind doors, waiting for the moment to strike. Against rifles, these tactics worked. Against shotguns, they became death traps. American assault teams learned quickly. A shotgunner went first. Doors were kicked open, and the weapon spoke before the enemy could react. In these confined spaces, buckshot turned every room into a kill zone. German soldiers found that even diving for cover offered little protection. Walls splintered. Furniture exploded. The psychological effect was immediate. Survivors spoke of a paralyzing dread, not of being shot, but of being erased in an instant, without warning or dignity. Armen Coent Army Isures and WWII Fidelity, German commanders were not ignorant. They adapted whenever they could. Orders circulated urging troops to engage Americans at longer ranges, to avoid confined spaces, and to rely more heavily on grenades and automatic weapons. But theory and reality rarely aligned. The battlefield did not allow for perfect distances. Towns had to be held. Bunkers had to be defended. Trenches had to be manned, and every one of these environments favored the shotgun. Some German units attempted to flood rooms with grenades before entering. Others fired blindly through walls, hoping to hit the unseen enemy. These measures slowed American advances, but they did not stop them. Shotguns did not replace rifles, they complemented them. While German soldiers hesitated, Americans moved forward aggressively, exploiting every moment of confusion. The shotgun became the spearhead of that aggression. Th. Suen, Brockie Morrill. Veterans on both sides later agreed on one thing: the sound of the shotgun mattered as much as its lethality. Unlike the sharp crack of a rifle or the mechanical chatter of a machine gun, the shotgun's blast was primal. Deep, violent. It echoed through corridors and cellars, announcing close, unavoidable danger. German soldiers learned to associate that sound with immediate loss. Once heard, panic often followed. Morale began to suffer. Units that had held against artillery and armor found themselves shaken by a single infantryman with a shotgun. Fear spread quickly, infecting even those who had never seen the weapon firsthand. Stories grew darker with each retelling. Men spoke of entire squads wiped out in seconds, of bunkers cleared without a single American casualty. Whether exaggerated or not, these stories shape behavior, and behavior shapes battles. Efron to Symbol. By late 1944, the American shotgun had become more than a tool of war. It was a symbol. To German soldiers, it represented unpredictability and ruthless efficiency. To Americans, it symbolized dominance in the most personal form of combat. Carrying a shotgun meant being the one who went first, who faced the enemy at arm's length, who decided the outcome in seconds. Some American units reportedly used this reputation deliberately. Shotguns were displayed openly during patrols. The message was clear. Resistance would be brief and painful. In war, perception can be as powerful as firepower, and the shotgun delivered both. As the Allies crossed into German territory, the fear followed them home. Cities that had never seen combat now braced for close quarters fighting. German civilians whispered rumors of American weapons that tore men apart. Soldiers tasked with defending their homeland faced an enemy whose reputation preceded them. The shotgun, once an obscure battlefield oddity, had become a psychological weapon of the first order. But the war was not yet over, and the ultimate legacy of the shotgun was still being written. As American forces pushed deeper into Europe, German fear began to take a new shape, not just terror on the battlefield, but outrage on paper. In officer briefings and legal discussions, the shotgun was no longer described merely as dangerous. It was labeled inhumane. German officials argued that the weapon caused unnecessary suffering, that its wounds were too severe, too chaotic, too brutal for what they called civilized warfare. The irony was striking. A war defined by strategic bombing, mass graves, and mechanized slaughter suddenly paused to debate the morality of a single infantry weapon. The accusation was not new. During World War I, Germany had formally protested the American use of trench shotguns, claiming they violated international law. Though the protest failed, the argument survived, resurfacing quietly during World War II. This time, however, it spread through rumor rather than diplomacy. German soldiers told one another that being captured with a shotgun might provoke retaliation. Others believed Americans using shotguns would be executed if caught. Whether these claims were true mattered less than their effect. They deepened fear and hardened resolve, transforming the shotgun from a weapon into a moral symbol of the enemy's supposed ruthlessness. Thela duo war, and its limites. International law at the time did not ban shotguns. No treaty explicitly forbade them. The laws of war focused on explosives, poison, and unnecessary suffering. But unnecessary was a word open to interpretation. The shotgun fired conventional ammunition. It was no more illegal than a rifle or machine gun. American legal officers were clear on this point. The weapon was lawful, effective, and well suited to the environments their troops faced. Yet legality does not always equal acceptance. German soldiers were trained within a military culture that valued precision and discipline. The shotgun violated that worldview. It felt chaotic, personal, indiscriminate at close range. To those on the receiving end, it seemed less like a soldier's weapon and more like an executioner's tool. This emotional response fed the narrative of inhumanity, even when the legal argument collapsed under scrutiny. Propaganda and PRCPION, German propaganda did its part. Stories circulated depicting American soldiers as brutal, reckless, and overly reliant on cowardly, close-range weapons. The shotgun became a convenient symbol, easy to vilify, easy to exaggerate. Posters, rumors, and whispered warnings painted a picture of Americans who preferred destruction over honor. For a nation under siege, such narratives offered both explanation and motivation. If the enemy was cruel, then resistance was justified. But propaganda works both ways. American troops were aware of German objections, and many found them absurd. To men who faced ambushes, snipers, and fortified positions daily, the shotgun was simply a tool that worked. They did not see cruelty. They saw survival. And in war, survival is the highest moral argument. What truly set the shotgun apart was the intimacy of its violence. Most weapons kill at a distance. The shotgun kills face to face. German soldiers were forced to confront not just death, but its immediacy. There was no time to rationalize. No moment to prepare. 1 second the room was quiet. The next, it was over. This closeness stripped away the abstraction of war and replaced it with raw human fear. Psychologists later noted that such experiences left deeper scars. Survivors often remembered shotgun encounters more vividly than artillery or bombing. The mind struggled to process how quickly everything had ended. This intensity reinforced the belief that the weapon was somehow different, more terrible than others on the battlefield. Rumors of retaliation. Among the darkest stories were rumors that German soldiers who captured Americans with shotguns should show no mercy. There is little evidence that such orders were officially issued, but rumors alone were enough. They raised the stakes for both sides. American soldiers carrying shotguns knew they might be singled out. German soldiers believed the weapon justified extreme responses. The result was escalation fueled by fear rather than facts. Ironically, this only strengthened the shotgun's psychological power. A weapon feared enough to provoke rumors of execution became a symbol of absolute threat. Its presence alone could decide whether a fight happened at all. The uncomfortable truth is that the shotgun was feared not because it broke the rules, but because it exposed them. It revealed the illusion of clean warfare. In a conflict defined by mass death, the shotgun forced soldiers to confront violence at its most personal level. It was not worse than other weapons. It was simply honest, and honesty is often what people fear most. In the end, the fear of the American shotgun was never really about the weapon itself. It was about what it represented. Close combat stripped war of its illusions. No distance, no glory, no time to think, just raw survival. For German soldiers trained to fight with precision and order, the shotgun brought chaos, sudden, personal, and unavoidable. It shattered morale more effectively than explosives ever could. And that is why its echo lingered long after the war ended. Not as a banned weapon, but as a reminder that sometimes the simplest tools leave the deepest scars. History often remembers the biggest machines in the loudest battles. But sometimes, the weapons that truly shape a war are the ones soldiers fear enough to whisper about in the dark. If you enjoyed this documentary, hit like. Subscribe for more cinematic WWII stories you won't find in textbooks. And tell us in the comments, do you think the shotgun was unfair, or just